Hi, my name is Eva, and I am going to be talking today about designing against domestic violence. I'm a principal designer at A-Flight. I'm also the founder of the Inclusive Safety Project, which is the organization I started around this work, and my pronouns are she and her. Before I go any further, I want to quickly explain to everyone why I'm here talking about domestic violence and hopefully establish some trust. I think with most talks, it's about something to do with design. The person is a designer, and you kind of just trust that they know what they're talking about. But domestic violence is a really important and really heavy topic. So I wanted to give a few of my qualifications. In 2013, I became a certified rape crisis counselor, which meant that after a bunch of training, I could go into emergency rooms and help people who were there seeking services after a sexual assault. As part of that training, I learned a lot about domestic violence, about how to recognize it, and how to support survivors. And then around the same time, I created a training on domestic violence for the people in my organization, who were mostly people deployed full-time into schools to work with high-needs kids. About 4 years ago, I made the switch over to tech and design, and I started seeing the ways in which domestic violence intersects with technology and how our design decisions are often leaving survivors of domestic violence behind. The consequences of that can be really deadly. So this talk is the first step of a much larger project I'm working on to make digital products safer for everyone by centering survivors of domestic violence. So I spent a lot of time immersed in this really heavy topic, but not all of my time. So I wanted to introduce you all to Hamlet and Horatio to show you that I do have some fun and that they help a lot in keeping me sane and happy during tough times. And we're all going through a tough time right now. It's a really intense time. So I just wanted to introduce these guys to you. And I also wanted to apologize if you hear any barking in the background. That is them. They're big boys and they have big barks. So apologies if you hear them. A couple more things before we begin. Based on statistics around domestic violence, there are survivors at this conference, and even though it is virtual, there's still going to be communication between participants, so just please make sure that you're being sensitive to the fact that if you discuss anything about this talk with anyone else who is attending this conference virtually, they might be a survivor, so just keep that in mind. And even though this UX Copenhagen virtual conference is virtual, it's still a safe space virtually. So feel free to leave at any point if you need to. You can step away from your computer. No one will be offended, certainly not me. So I'm going to kick things off right away with a story. And I'm going to be telling a few stories throughout this talk. And they're all true, although I have changed names and identifying details to protect people's anonymity. This is Isaac and Helen. After they get married, they merge their finances and they open up a joint bank account. Now, despite the fact that they went to the bank together to set it up, joint accounts typically have a primary user, and the banker sets Isaac as that person. This means that whenever Helen logs into the account from a new computer or a new Wi-Fi network, she gets those identity verification questions that are things like, which house number goes with this old house, what's an old address, etc. These questions are all about Isaac's identity, though, and she has to ask him for the answers. This gives him a bunch of power, and over time, he takes advantage of the fact that he has all this power when it comes to their bank account. He opens up a new account for Helen and restricts her access to the other ones. He puts money into the account she uses. He's essentially giving her an allowance. Without true access to all of their money, Helen is dependent on Isaac for pretty much everything. It also means that it's really hard for her to leave, even though she wants to, because she can't exactly just rent a hotel room or buy a train ticket. 99% is the percentage of abusive relationships that have an element of financial abuse. So this is nearly all of them, and this statistic is true pretty much worldwide. So here's the first way that we can start to break down this big problem of technology-facilitated domestic violence into something a little smaller and more manageable, which is dealing with the financial abuse part. When we work on any product that has to do with finances, there are a few things we should consider. Joint accounts and other banking tools should be fully joint in a digital sense, and that includes having separate logins. There shouldn't be one person in a joint account that gets to be the primary user who actually has more control, especially when we live in patriarchal societies that usually default to privileging men's power over women's. Financial software should also be programmed to recognize the patterns of financial abuse. Flagging suspicious activities is a really common thing in banking software, and it should be extended to the known activities that are associated with financial abuse, like an account being consistently overdrawn when that was never an issue in the past, because a lot of times abusers will overdraw the victim's account to ruin their credit. Now, I admit that this is a really big lift. This isn't something that most people can just go out and immediately do in their day-to-day. But I want to bring it up anyway because just imagine the type of impact that someone here at UX Copenhagen who works in fintech could make if they were to take on this challenge. If we were able to use software to recognize financial abuse, we would be able to alert financial professionals who work actually with the customers that a suspicious behavior has been identified, and then they would be able to offer a point of intervention. Right now, financial professionals are trained on one form of financial abuse, which is financial abuse of the elderly. They should also be trained on financial abuse in a domestic situation. Speaking to some bankers as I was doing research in this area, I learned that pretty much all of them have encountered situations where a client says something or does something that sets off a red flag, and they think that something's not right, but they're not empowered and they're not trained on what to do. So they just have to make a judgment call and kind of hope for the best. And also when I did this talk in Australia, I learned that their major banks actually do have some really good protocols around this stuff. They have whole specific groups that are working just with people who are experiencing financial abuse in a domestic violence setting, and it has resources and a special call center for them where people are specially trained on how to work with them. So there is a model for this that American and Danish banks could use. And remember that because financial abuse is so common, it happens in over 99% of domestic violence situations, this is a really crucial intervention point. Okay, so I'm going to backtrack a little bit. My goal today is not to do general domestic violence education, but to help you all as designers and people who work in tech and influence digital products to understand how domestic violence gets enacted through technology and what we can do to stop it. How can we design our products to encourage honest, positive, and safe interactions and do our best to prevent the dishonest, hateful, and dangerous ones? There are no silver bullets. Every product and system is unique, which means there are endlessly unique ways that they can be used for harm. But I'm going to go through several more examples that will lay the groundwork you need to hopefully take this way of thinking back to work with you. And I want to quickly acknowledge that no one means for their products to be used for abuse. But that doesn't mean it doesn't happen, and it doesn't give us an out. Having good intentions doesn't matter to the person who is dealing with the terrible impact. I bring this up now because it's a really common excuse from people after they accidentally do something bad. Well, I didn't mean to, my intent was not to hurt you. And honestly, it doesn't really matter. The intent of the design team to create a useful product doesn't matter to the person who is being terrorized with that product. What matters is the impact. Thank you very much.